We get a lot of questions about frequency of cut on the flail mower. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna come out in this field every week for the next 8 weeks and mow different spots at different intervals. One area will be mowed weekly, the second area will be mowed every other week, the third area will be mowed every 4 weeks, and the last area will be mowed only today and the final time that we shoot the video. And we are back with the 8-week mowing interval test of the Ventrac Flail mower. So again, we are using the fine cut flail mower for this job. We have 4 different test plots: weekly, bi-weekly, once every month, and then the final one is only mowed when we first started, and now we'll mow it again today. We settled on 3.5 inches of cut height on the test plots themselves and 2.5 inches on the perimeters around. What we want to observe today is what those areas look like both before and after we mow them. And it will hopefully allow you to kind of make an estimation on what do I need to use as an interval if I want to maintain a green space not weekly like I am now, or if even bi-weekly or something like that. If I want to try and adjust it, what kind of penalty am I going to pay aesthetically or with the quality of the turf that's there? So this isn't treated at all. It was planted at one point, so we did level this field off and we seeded with just a general field mix. It's probably got some fescue in there, some ryegrass, a little bit of everything. But it's a good indicator of what a lot of these green spaces look like because most of them are left natural. There's not a lot of money or time spent on maintaining areas like this where nothing happens. So it just takes time and energy to mow it. So we just don't do it all that often. But it's a perfect place to show what an area like that looks like and evolves to as you let it go. So let's go. First, look at some of these plots. We'll start here at this most neglected one, I'll call. So again, this one we mowed on week 0. So we mowed this one time. The area just behind it, we didn't mow at all. So this path in here was mowed 8 times as a perimeter boundary. And you can see a little bit more density in that area over there that we didn't touch. It's not honestly that much taller, but we did have a dry spell there in between maybe week 3 and 5 where we didn't get a lot of rain for about 2 weeks. So it really slowed the growth of this. And that's the other thing to mention too, is the soil type here, the moisture that we get, it's all variable. So you're not gonna see exactly the same result wherever you're at. We're mostly cool season turf here, and we get a fair bit of moisture throughout the summer. We're not like the West Coast or anything where once the summer hits, we get no rain at all. This is probably a total of, in those 8 weeks, maybe 10 inches of accumulation, 8 to 10 inches of accumulation. It's been fairly consistent. So again, getting back to the actual turf and the grass inside, what you'll see as far as like weed concentration in this plot here that we left go through the whole test is it's pretty similar to the unmowed areas. You see this stuff here, this is kind of a stringy, I think they call this Queen Anne's lace. I'm not sure what the scientific term is for it, but this stuff is pretty tall. You're looking at maybe 2 feet tall in some areas. The density of this in particular is pretty similar to the unmowed area behind us. But then as you look down towards the next plots, and this yellow weed here as well, you'll start to see that decrease a little bit. And even though the grass is maybe as tall in those spots where the weeds are growing, it's a little bit less concentrated here in this spot. So this spot was mowed twice because this was our 1-month interval spot. The grass here is also a little bit greener. It's a little bit thicker at base level, although not much shorter. So you're starting to see some of the grasses, the actual grasses, the desirable ones that we want, start to go to seed over here in this long-term area. In this spot here, there's nothing at seed, but it is a little bit thicker, a little bit greener underneath this weed canopy, and it looks a little bit nicer, but it does still look pretty unmowed. And then you get over to this spot here. So this was done every other week. And you see even less of the tall weeds. They are still there though. So in 2 weeks, it's a long enough time to start to see some of that weed growth happen. But this same stuff is maybe half the height that it is in those other areas. It does grow a lot faster than the grass, but it's a lot less prolific. And you can look down through, you can actually still see the stripes from 2 weeks ago when we mowed it. And so actually, I guess that would be 1 week ago, whatever. It's an every other week plot, so you can still see the stripes, but they're not quite as pronounced as the main lawn that we maintain here. And then we move down towards our weekly area. And that's right here. And at this point, you see none of that white weed flower. You do see some of the yellow stuff. Again, we're not treating these areas, so it is what it is. and it's a little bit less pronounced in terms of grass quality than what's right next to it, to the left, which is an area that we mow weekly with a finish mower, and we do fertilize and treat for weeds. And so that's a totally different area, totally different program, but it doesn't look ridiculously different. So this is just a field grass area that we don't put any attention to, but it still looks kind of good, and it's still striped up pretty well from the last week that we mowed it. So we'll go ahead and we'll mow all of these plots. We're gonna do them all again at the same height that we've been doing them the whole test, 3.5 inches. But it'll be, again, since we started the test, it'll be the first time that final plot was mowed. And then once we're done, what we wanna look at is, what does that finished product look like? So this is the big kind of finale, is if I let an area like this go and I don't mow it for 2 months, it gets a little taller, there's a few more weeds there, it's maybe a little bit slower to work through, but at the end of the day, what does it look like when I mow it? Because that's kind of what matters. If I can afford to let it go for a while and then mow it and it still looks okay, then maybe I can just afford to mow it less. And that's what we want to answer today. So we'll do that with all of these plots. I'll mow the perimeter, get a couple good stripes down there, and then we'll come back and look and see what the end product looks like. That wraps up mowing all of these plots, and there's a few careful observations that you can make here. So what I noticed first is that basically everything still looks really good. There's no limitation in this area to the flail mower working well. It just looks a little bit different. But the first thing I noticed is that on the more frequently maintained plots, they look a little bit darker green. Everything looks good and there's really good contrast everywhere. But on those ones, they look a little bit darker green, and then that starts to fade to a little bit lighter the further down you get down these test plots. So this one here that I'm standing next to is the one that we only did twice, on the very first day and the very last day. And the only thing that I noticed while mowing it is that you get a little bit of material buildup that sits on top. So this is a little more than you would see on those early plots, and it's just because you're chopping off a lot more stuff. But I have to laugh every time I do it because the dispersion of that material using the fine cut flail is so good that you almost don't know that it started out as tall grass. Even though it was knee high, at least in spots and worse in some other cases, it looks not that much different than even the plot just right next to it that was mowed twice as often during this whole test. So we'll go down to that one next. We skip here. So you can see this is a really good spot to show that contrast down here at ground level. This is the first pass of the final plot, and this is what that material that I'm talking about is sitting on top. You know, from 10, 20, 30, 40 feet away, this looks really great, and then you get real down close and you notice that it's not finish mower quality. You know, this isn't what you'd expect if you ran a finish mower over this weekly, but in this case doesn't need to be. Right next to it though, however, and this is the spot that we were mowing a lot lower, this is very different. Again, this is also not quite finish mower quality, but you don't have any debris on top. It's a little bit darker green. It's something that is probably preferred as far as aesthetics go over this next area, but it gives you an idea of this was mowed 8 times and this was only mowed 2 times. So if you're weighing your options, what should I do balancing aesthetic and the workload, then that's a really good example. And then this is the third in our plots. So this was mowed just twice as many times. So this was mowed monthly as the last plot. Looks really good. And I would say there's more difference between this and the final plot than this and the second plot. So there's, from what I can tell mowing it and being on the seat of the tractor as I carry on, my vantage point as an operator shows me that the benefit of the flail probably doesn't kick in on the first plot. It's not really that much nicer to use than a finish deck, and you don't need it because you're not cutting off a lot of material. But it starts to show itself on the second and third plots, which would be bi-weekly and monthly. And the monthly plot looks and mows a lot nicer than the final plot, which was 2 months. So that's probably where I'd settle if I wanted an aesthetic that was balancing aesthetic and workload, where I valued the workload and lack thereof more. And then if I wanted pure aesthetic, I still wouldn't bother mowing weekly. I would go to this spot here and I would mow bi-weekly, because this looks almost identical to the weekly spot and I'm doing half the work. You get down here at ground level, the weeds are really nowhere to be found at this point. The quality looks really good for rough cut applications and infrequent applications. And aesthetically, especially from the air or from the road, anywhere where anybody's going to be viewing this, this looks about as good as a lot of finished turf properties, honestly. So here at the first plot, there's not a lot to report different than the second plot. We did this twice as many times because we did this every single week, so it was twice as much work as the second plot. But honestly, it looks almost identical, even from my height or ground level. You get down and start looking at it. It's also not finish cut quality. You know, you have a little bit of grass height difference here that you wouldn't expect to see with a regular finish deck, but looks really good from the road, looks really good from the air. If you're gonna mow it this frequently, just use a finish deck because the cut quality will be better and you'll be able to go a little bit faster, I think. Also, the flail has a harder time grabbing this grass and pulling it up and cutting it off because it's not quite long enough. The flail needs the grass to be a little bit longer than you would traditionally expect. So on a finish deck, if you're going out and traditionally cutting off a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch of grass or somewhere in that range, the flail, if it's tasked with that, it doesn't do as good a job as if it has a couple inches to cut off. The point here is that if you're really critical about grass, if you're in the landscape industry and it's something you really care about, it's true professional results, you want the best of the best, you're obviously gonna need that weekly program with weed and feed, and you're really gonna wanna take care of it regularly. But if you have a corporate client or a municipal client or something like that, where they're really looking for the best mix, then you have to start looking at things like this and going, is it good enough? I'm standing in between two plots here where I think the sweet spot is. This is the second plot and the third plot. The second plot was mowed 5 times. The first time on week 0 and then 4 times after that. The third plot was only mowed a total of 3 times, which is incredible if you really consider how it looks. We mowed it on week 0, and then we only mowed it once during the whole test, and then again today here at the end. So for being mowed 3 times, you really have to consider and start asking yourself, it looks really good. I mean, you look at the stripes here in the third plot, they're a little worse than the second, and I mean a little. They're so close. And then you start looking back towards that weekly manicured spot and even beyond in the treated yard, and you have to ask, it looks really good. Is it worth all of the extra time and resources to make the grass look this much better over here on the other side? To some people, the answer is yes, absolutely. Other people, the answer is, I'm not sure yet. And that's what we hope this video does, is show you that there are options here. And with equipment like the flail mower, it opens up those options. You don't necessarily have to settle with good looking or not that much work. You can have a mix of, you know, not spending too much time on it and have it still look incredible. And then the one thing that I did after this, I went all the way down to the end and I mowed another pass. We hadn't planned on doing this, but I mowed it in the open grass that we haven't manicured at all this year. And here in Ohio, we are just coming into August. So what that means is that we've been doing this for June and July. So this area over here adds another, let's call it 6 weeks or so of full temperature grass growing season, because we don't quite get there in Ohio until that, like, you know, April, May-ish time frame. So let's say 6 weeks, give or take a couple weeks. And this looks a little bit different than that 8-week time frame. So you're talking almost twice here, almost twice the amount of time, so looking almost 4 months, and you get a lot more grass on the top here. On a brush cutting application, normally you'd see this grass be a lot longer and these pieces wouldn't be quite as fine. So this looks a little bit like a hayfield now, but here in a couple days when this stuff dries out and you see what's underneath, I think the big difference you're gonna find with this plot versus our final plot at the end of the official test plots is that you'll have a few more stringers in here but it still looks pretty good. If you did the whole field like this and you waited all season to do this until midsummer here where it's a little bit dry and the conditions are a little faster, you would still have a pretty good looking area here using the fine cut flail. The other thing that I had to chuckle at is that when I get down to those final plots that I haven't mowed in 2 months, it's almost hilarious how well the flail does compared to if you tried to tackle that with a finish mower. We see a lot of videos out there on the internet, people doing overgrown properties, and they're basically just using a standard finish deck and double cutting or triple cutting because you absolutely have to. If I would have tried to cut even these areas that look really nice now, this final plot that doesn't have a lot of debris on top of it, if I would have tried to cut this with a finish mower, I would have made huge windrows, and then I would have had to go over and cut those again. And every time you hit them, they're spreading them basically to the equal distance away, but not really getting rid of them. The even dispersion of the flail mower is what's really valuable here because it saves time. You don't have to go back over it. It looks good on pass number 1. I can cut it once and be gone. I don't have to keep chasing this whole area. So it's very fast and it's an effective way to do it and still look really good. Based on the results of this video, if there are any other tests that you want us to do similar to this in kind of a similar style, let us know in the comments below. We've got time, we've got property here. We obviously have all the equipment. We like to do things like this to kind of show the variability of the equipment and what we can learn. So if you have any wild ideas, let us know. I know there's some out there about comparing different types of mowers in the same grasses and what that might look like. So we're always thinking about that. Let us know what you're thinking. And I do have to give you the obligatory reminder that if you found this video offensive because you mow your grass every day or every other day, if you're a golf course or something, we do have real mowers for this tractor. So we do all of that stuff too. Or if you found this video laughable because you only mow your grass once a year, we've got our Tough Cut. It can handle those jobs. Maybe you're in the Southwest, you don't have grass, you just have rocks or cactus. We've got a power bucket and material movers. This tractor will do it all. So the obvious reminder that the versatility is there. But anyway, if you're interested in this machine, the flail mower, or any of our other attachments, you can visit us online at ventrac.com. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you catch all the future videos. We're going to do some more tests similar to this, and I hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching.